So today we're back at it talking about, yet again, more cards that have been revealed for Return to Clockwork City. Just like the previous videos, my assessment today is going to be mostly based on the information that we have at hand. So if you watch this in the future and I'm way off on some of these, it's probably because either other cards were revealed that make these better or worse, or something happens in the meta that was potentially unforeseen. But we're going to talk about cards that have been shown, their potential relative power level, and also what I like to do is I like to say, you know, if this card is on the edge or if this card has potential, kind of talk about what to look for in the other cards that are revealed that could make them good. So let's just dive right in and look at the cards we got today. First up, we have Grappling Hook. This is kind of a fun card because I really enjoy the flavor, the way the mechanic kind of embodies a grappling hook when used in a combat-oriented sort of way. This is a 4-cost item in strength. It provides the creature +3/+2, which is not insignificant when it comes to stats. And it has summon, move an enemy creature into this lane, it loses cover. So whatever lane you play the grappling hook into, if there is a creature in the opposing lane, you pull them over. And if they are coming from the shadow lane to the field lane, they also lose cover. I like this card because it can be used both aggressively and defensively. It is kind of in a weird, unique spot. Defensively, if your opponent's trying to hide something that they want to hit you in the face with, you can slide it over, punch it in the face, right? Like, I've got something in the field lane, I've taken control of the field lane, my opponent plays something nasty in the shadow lane, I force it over and then trade into it. If you're playing Battle Mage, for example, this card could be cheeky fun on your Daggerfall Mage, right? Players will often try to avoid the Daggerfall Mage. You know, if you kill something with a firebolt early and then you play a Daggerfall in the field lane, a lot of players will like concede the field lane and then start playing in the shadow lane. Grappling Hook would potentially allow you to not only pull that creature over and kill it, but then also leave you with a very, very large Daggerfall Mage still in the field lane. That being said, it's also potentially a very cheeky aggressive tool because this has the potential to slide guards over. Specifically, I think about moving guards over that may have been problematic if you had like a solo creature and now you want to move it over to a lane where you've got more creatures or something like that. So a scenario actually might be where, you know, somebody plays you know, you play Underworld Vigilante and you swing into your opponent, and then they follow up and they play like Tree Minder in front of it, right? So you've got your 4/1, you've got no other creatures there. You're like, well, man, I really don't want to lose my Underworld Vigilante to this podunk, you know, 1/1 with guard. Magically, you slap down another charger. Maybe it's, you know, Rampaging Minotaur would be ideal because that also has breakthrough. But even if it's something as cheeky as like a Nord Firebrand, whatever the case may be, you could play that in the other lane to slide it over, your Vigilante goes through, your other creature survives the trade, or you could just slap this on the Vigilante if you don't have another creature and then it survives the trade, right? You don't have to use the lane movement mechanic, but it can help. Like maybe they put down a Hive Defender and you're nowhere near coming close to the ability of being able to trade into a Hive Defender right now. Slide it over and then just keep pushing field lane, right? There's, again, some potential cheeky uses. This card is a common. Where I see this card making the biggest splash is going to be Arena, because it's a common, because it has utility, because it provides a decent amount of stats. I think that this card is going to be very, very good in Arena. If it does end up seeing any play at all in Constructed, it would be as a 1 or a 2 of likely at best, barring some sort of like really weird combo that we just don't know about yet. Because inherently, like, you have to look at this card and say, like, is this better than Shield Breaker, and at what point would I want to play this over Shield Breaker, because Shield Breaker is trying to let you do the same thing but cheaper, and cost matters, especially for aggressive decks. But I do like this card in Arena. In Arena, I think this card is fantastic. So I think that's where ultimately Grappling Hook is going to shine. Yeah, I mean, that's about it. I think that it's good enough to, you know, slide into maybe a constructive deck, you know, here or there. But for the most part, I think that Arena is the place you'll see this the most, and will probably give you nightmares in Arena. So, Grappling Hook. Next up, we have Dwarven Colossus. This card is an 11/11 for 11. It is a neutral Dwemer. I never say it correctly. I'm pretty sure it's Dwemer. I have had enough people correct me now, but this also has a summon ability. And when it enters play, you summon a power sphere in each lane. Now, the power spheres are, according to Snacksy, who is the person who revealed this, 0/5 creatures that they count as defenses, not as Dwemer, and that matters for like Halls of the Dwemer. But they're 0/5s with guard, and they say at the start of your turn, give Dwarven Colossus a random keyword. So, if both spheres and the Colossus survive for one turn, it gets 2 random keywords, and every turn thereafter, for each sphere, it continues to get random keywords. So, this card is interesting because it's a huge stat line, but it's weak to single target removal, but it has the potential to get bigger, and it's weak to single target removal, but not necessarily trades, because you'll have to go through at least the guard, right? So you could play this into a lane that has like a lethal creature, and they would have to kill the power sphere to get to the Colossus. So in many ways, this is almost slightly hardier than Iron Atronach, maybe in the same vein, because Iron Atronach dodges actions like Piercing Javelin and finish off. This card does not dodge those actions, but this does dodge direct trades until they go through at least the one power sphere that is with this. This itself does not have guard, at least for the first turn. It might get it from power spheres, so this can also hide in the shadow lane where Iron Atronach cannot. To me, that's the card that you most naturally compare this to, because it's really just like a giant stat line that you play and say to your opponent, like, have an answer or you likely lose. It's very similar to Iron Atronach in many ways, but the fact that it's neutral means that it might pop up. The big thing, right, is that this might be almost like a stealth nerf to Desperate Conjuring, because before Desperate Conjuring, if you used it on a 9-cost creature, you were getting either Mirac or Diveth. So you had a 50-50 shot at Mirac, which is pretty solid, right? It's the sort of thing you want to plan around. But now that drops to at least a third. Who knows, maybe even less if we get more cards revealed at the 11 slot. I would be shocked if we did, because big creatures like this are pretty rare. But it is kind of a stealth nerf to Desperate Conjuring. But Dwarven Colossus, huge stats, require an answer. The fact that they leave behind the guards, like even if they have a Piercing Javelin for the Colossus, the guards are not inconsequential. So if you're playing this in a control deck as a finisher, it is kind of nice that you also at least get a couple of 0/5 guards out of it. I could see against certain aggressive decks where playing this and then like playing a Night to Remember on it might just be enough to like win the game. Because not only do they have to go through the guards, but the minute that this thing gets like drained from one of the 4 power spheres the following turn, might just be enough to seal it. So that's kind of cheeky. It's also worth noting this is not a legendary, a unique legendary, I mean, so you can play 3 of them. I don't know why you would want to play 3, but again, there are potential unknown synergies that could be revealed later. Right now, I just see this card as it's a finisher, right? I don't know if it's going to see a ton of play because it doesn't do anything immediately when it hits the board. Mirac is only a 5/5, but at the same cost, it does also steal a creature, right? So it's a very nice reactive play to help you stabilize. This card does some in the O5s, but that's a little bit more passive than directly stealing something, so I don't know. It's certainly viable as a finisher. Like I said, in many cases you're going to play this, and if they don't have an answer, you likely just win the game. The problem is that people are going to have an answer. So I don't know. It'll be fun. It'll certainly see play in Dwemer decks, right? So Dwarven Centurion used to be like the big baddie for those decks. Now we have this guy. That'll be fun. At 11, if you're playing an altar deck and you were not running willpower or intelligence, you at least now have something that you can throw one of in on the off chance you get up to 11. Though if you've made it that far, let's be honest, you've already won the game. But it is an 11 drop that's in neutral, so you have access to those now. Yeah, that's kind of where I am on Dwarven Colossus. I don't think it's going to like rock the meta. I think that it will see play just because it's cheeky and fun and some people will try it out. So like if you see it, don't be shocked. But I don't think it's going to be, you know, like an auto include in every control deck by any means. Not without, again, some other card making this better than what it would be currently. So yeah, Dwarven Colossus. Next up is the card that Justin and I revealed on our podcast when Pete Hines was our guest, and that is Treasure Map. This is a 3-cost neutral item. It gives the creature +1/+1. It has the on-summon effect of draw a card, but if the wielder has Treasure Hunt, you draw something that they're hunting for instead. Now we did get verification this does draw the item or action or creature or whatever, right? From your deck. So if you play this on something with Treasure Hunt, it's not going to just give you a random thing. It's going to give you said thing from your deck. And that makes this card pretty powerful. The big thing is going to be how many creatures have Treasure Hunt and what they are looking for. Because this is essentially like a tutor. That's a term that if you're not familiar comes from Magic the Gathering, but cards that let you search for a specific card in your deck are considered like tutor effects. It references an old card called Demonic Tutor. Those are powerful effects. The fact that you could run Treasure Map, and again, it's going to be dependent on what kind of Treasure Hunt things are out there, but if you can run Treasure Map and you've got a creature that say has like Treasure Hunt and it only says like draw a support, for example, well, then you could just run one support in your deck, and Treasure Map would then always draw you said support when you play it, right? Like, that's a tutor effect. That's very powerful. Even if it gives you a 50-50 shot, it's going to be pretty good. Even if it's on something like Ratway Prospector, I think it's pretty good. Also, in all honesty, +1/+1 and draw a card in neutral is just good enough. Like, I will certainly play this card a ton in Arena, whether or not I have Treasure Hunt creatures, because +1/+1 and draw a card, it's just good enough. And the added bonus of potentially finding what I'm looking for is great. Another thing that was confirmed during our podcast, Maricon, one of the developers, was in. He also noted that it will draw something that they are hunting for, and it does rule out things that have already met criteria. So Ratway Prospector is another card that had been revealed, and that has a Treasure Hunt where it's looking for, I believe, an item, an action, and a support. Now, if you've already drawn, let's say, a support and an action, Treasure Map will only find an item at that point. So it's only going to find you things you're still looking for. That's another way to kind of control what you find, and it's also a great way to help trigger your Treasure Hunt creatures. So this card, in my opinion, is good on the cusp of great, with the caveat being that it really depends on how good and how many the creatures with Treasure Hunt are in the next set. If there's enough viable creatures with Treasure Hunt, this card becomes very, very good, and that's really it. Like, it's good right now, but I mean, it's going to be great if there are viable and a decent quantity of creatures that have Treasure Hunt, because tutor effects are powerful. And again, even just cycling this to draw a card is great. Even if you think about like the blacksmith decks running around where they, you know, they buff up the items in your deck. The fact that this, you know, could be, you know, +2/+2, +3/+3 for 3 and draw a card is still really strong. So that guy is honestly buffed by this card, in my opinion. I think you would run this in those decks. Yeah, treasure map. That's where I'm at. Good, on the cusp of great, with the caveat being we need to see more of the treasure hunt creatures coming out of this set. Next up we have Assembled Titan. This was revealed on the Bethesda stream with CVH, and this is the unique legendary factotum. So this is a 6 cost 4/4, but it has Assemble, just like the other factotum that's been revealed, but this time you choose 2. And the choices here are pretty significant, in my opinion. It's +2/+0, +0/+2, deal 2 damage to your opponent or gain 2 health. Now, the things to remember are, 1, you choose 2, but also that this gets applied to every other factotum that you are running, and that is a pretty significant deal. It's also been confirmed that the Assemble does work like a summon, so if you play things like Dark Rebirth, A Night to Remember, so on and so forth, it would re-trigger this. If you were to Soul Tear this, it would also re-trigger it, so you can keep reapplying these. But for me, the more I think about factotum, the more I think about this could be potentially played in like control decks. I think that's where factotum might end up being. The longer the game goes, the more you create this sense of inevitability. Like, even the little creatures have the potential to get bigger and bigger and bigger with every one that you play, but not even just growing in size. The fact that this can gain you 2 health means you can buy yourself time to stabilize. You know, gaining 2 health is not insignificant, and gaining 2 health every time you play a factotum has a lot of potential. This card, like the other factotums that have been revealed, I think actually only one that's been revealed so far, but how good this is going to just depend on the quantity and quality of factotum. So if we get a decent amount and they're all even remotely at all viable, this card becomes fantastic. We would expect it to be fantastic because it is a unique legend, but this has a lot of potential. Again, the caveat, just like so many other things, is it depends on what's revealed, unfortunately, but I could really see factotum actually developing into like this grindy control deck where you're essentially over time turning all of your like tiny insignificant creatures into late game threats where you're just, you know, essentially playing bomb after bomb after bomb for cheap because they're just growing in power, growing in complexity, growing in size. I mean, that's why this is called Assembled Titan, right? Like, it's assembling Voltron, but you're just making it so that every factotum you play is Voltron. It's a factotum pull. You just keep stacking them up. So, yeah, Assembled Titan, I think, is, just like the other cards, good on the cusp of being great, with the caveat of being, you know, what other factotum are revealed. For me, right now, we've seen things that buff stats, we've seen give it lethal, and now we've seen give 2 damage to your opponent or gain 2 health. If we see one that is at all decent and provides guard, I think that cements it as a potential control strategy. If you can keep playing creatures that provide guard and gain 2 health, and also have like lethal from the other one that's been revealed, it's going to be a pretty big deal. So yeah, look for those. We don't know how many we're going to see. That's going to determine the overall power level of this card, but on the surface, you know, factoring in the unknown, it looks like it has the potential to be really good. So that is Assembled Titan. Next up is Cog Collector, and let me start by saying that I love this card and the next card we're going to talk about, because I've been saying for a bit that I would like to see Pilfer become more utility based than just straight like smash and snowball as a mechanic, because I think that's how you get interest in it again, right? Get that viability going, and Cog Collector is like right up that alley. So Cog Collector is a 2-cost agility Khajiit with a 1/2 for the stat line. It has Pilfer, add a gear to Cog Collector. And when it was revealed, and you'll notice from the art here, it says Last Grasp, but I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be Last Gasp. Summon a random neutral creature with a cost equal to the number of gears on Cog Collector. So this card is interesting because it's going to generate value for you, but it might not be great value. You know, you're going to drop it as a 2 cost. If it hits your opponent even one time, then when it dies, it'll be replaced with potentially like a Mud Crab. Even if you play it and it gets Firebolted right away, it might leave behind like the 0/3 guard, or I think Sweet Rolls count as a 0 cost neutral creature or whatever, right? But you're going to get something. If it hits a couple of times, then you start to get slightly better things. You know, even at 1 cost, if this gives you like a Shadow Mirror, then this card is actually pretty decent, right? Like, I think that's the dream. Instead of a Mud Crab, you want to get a Shadow Mirror. But what's interesting to me is that they've added this like add a gear mechanic. So I want to say keep an eye out for other creatures that may deal with gear tokens, if you will, and also keep an eye out for cards that may add gears. Like we could potentially, again, this is all the unknown, right? But we could potentially see you know, Dwemer or other robotic creatures that benefit from having gears added to them, and then we might see actions that say like, you know, put 2 gears on target creature or something that would do cheeky fun things. I would hope that we would see things like that, or I would personally like to see things like that. I love it when other card games have done you know, thematic things like that in the past. Magic the Gathering, for example, does a lot of stuff with like energy, or does stuff with like brick tokens in a recent set. But even if you go back to like Mirrodin, they've done similar things, and I mean like original Mirrodin. I would love to see stuff like that. In terms of power level, this card is in an interesting spot because you don't really want to play it in a control deck because it requires Pilfer, and so you don't want to punch your opponent too much in the face, right? You don't want to give them free cards. You also kind of don't really want to play it in an aggressive deck because the 1/2 is pretty poor stats, and it doesn't do anything when it immediately hits the board. I could see this in a Last Gasp based deck, and I could see this in maybe certain versions of mid-range just because of the stickiness, right? Even if it leaves behind something, that's better than nothing. I think that for this to actually have its value determined properly, we got to know how many other ways there are to get gear on this, or how many other things interact with gear. Yeah, on the surface, like I said, you would potentially play it in things where you want a sticky creature because it's going to leave behind something. But, you know, like maybe like Token Monk or something might like it, right? Something where you're going to play like Divine Fervor, so it's going to buff this guy, and it's also going to buff whatever you leave behind. Mid-range Monk maybe if you're going down that same path, but yeah, like I said, 1/2 for 2, not great. This card feels really good if you have the ring. If you don't have the ring and you're not getting, you know, I would say, you know, 1, 2, 3 whacks in with it, probably not going to feel very good when you play it. So yeah, this one is definitely, I would say, you keep an eye out for other things, but otherwise it's just like middle of the road at best right now. But I like what they're doing. Like, in terms of the mechanic, I really dig it. I hope we see more of that. And it's a great segue into the next card, which also has Pilfer, but the next card I think is actually really good. So let's take a look at that. So the last card that we're looking at is Sails Through Storms. This is a unique legendary creature for agility. It costs 6, but it has a 5/5 worth of stats, and that's not insignificant. And it also says, Pilfer, summon the top creature of your deck. I really like this card. I like this card a lot. This is, in my opinion, a million times better than Quinral Burglar, which is the natural comparison because it's another 6-cost creature with Pilfer. And the reason is that it has the 5/5 worth of stats. Now, I wish this was a 4/5 more than anything. Believe it or not, this card is buffed if it goes down to 4/5, because then it's not guaranteed to break a rune. And then you maybe get a second like whack out of it. But even at 5/5, I think it's great. I think it's great in like mid-range decks because it requires an answer. Might even see play in like, I don't know, some weird control decks. Probably not because of the 5 attack. But this reminds me a lot of like Undying Dragon, because it's a 6 cost 5/5 that just has to be answered immediately. It's also very similar to like Gortwog, right? Like, again, you have to deal with it, because if you don't, getting creatures for free is a big deal, but because that this is in agility, unlike Gortwog, and because it has Pilfer as well, this means that there are plenty of ways to trigger this. Multiple times. You have things like Swift Strike. If you're in Monk, you've obviously got your Master of Thieves, which can let it swing twice. But because this is just agility and not a class card, you even get fun, cheeky things like Archer Tools. So Archer's Gambit and the Crossbow, if played in conjunction with this card, immediately get you the trigger. So for 8, for example, you could play this in Archer's Gambit, and you not only get this on the board, but then you also get the Pilfer trigger immediately. And depending on what you're playing, that could be huge. Like if you think about, most Rage Archer decks right now that are running the Gambit for early game and removal, but let's say, you're getting to the mid game, you're getting to the late game, you could very easily see yourself playing this, taking a gamble, using the Gambit, and maybe you get a Belligerent Giant out of it. Maybe you get that Vigilant Giant out of it. Might be worth, if you've already got decent control of the board, or maybe you don't have lethal creatures in your hand or on the board to make best use of the Gambit, it might be entirely reasonable to just say, you know what, let's take a gamble. Same thing with the Crossbow, right? If you play this guy and you play a Crossbow, you can just choose to ping right in the face and get additional value. So I really like this card, and I like it because of all the different ways we have to like trigger it now that we wouldn't have had. Like this card in the core set, still really good, but wouldn't have been nearly as good as it is today with all the additional ways we have to trigger Pilfer. You give this thing Breakthrough and then play Unstoppable Rage, and you're gonna have some hilarious clips to put up on YouTube, right? Like, this card is very good in Archer. I think it's very good in like mid-range Monk. I also want to point out that the 5 health is entirely relevant because, unlike Quinwall Burglar, this survives Lightning Bolt. It does still die to Piercing Javelin. It does still die to, finish off effects, right? So if they have that Cursed Leaf Lurker, not much you can do. But the fact that it survives Lightning Bolt, and that there are now tools that exist to potentially trigger the Pilfer before your opponent has the time to respond, make this card way better than it would have been in the past, and it certainly makes it way better than Quinwall Burglar. Which you would expect, because this is a unique legend and not just a normal legend like Burglar. So, like, that's to be expected, but I'm just very excited about this card and the things that you can potentially do with it. It is certainly, again, in mid-range, like if you're a mid-range player, this is the kind of card that you do likely want to play on curve against control, because you're saying to them, like, have an answer for this or you likely lose. And even if you have an answer, hopefully then you've been playing other creatures and, they get to continue to threaten and push and so forth, right? Like, this is just cool. I also really like that it's summoned the top creature of your deck. There are certain cards that exist now that like buff specifically the top creature, and maybe we'll get some more. I would like to see more effects like that. But when you think about like the Battle Axe and Strength, for example, that gives +4/+4, and then gives +4/+4 to the top creature of your deck, playing that, you play this guy on 6, you play the Battle Axe on 7, you swing, and then you get the buffed creature. Is it likely to happen? No, because that axe doesn't really see playing constructed, but would it feel good if it happened? Yeah, sure, absolutely, right? Like, I like that it's specifically the top creature of your deck, because then that means that there are potential combos that, you could set up in the future, right? Pay close attention to anything that deals with, like, the top card or the top creature in your deck. because of this card. Yeah, Sails Through Storms I'm a big fan of. I'm excited to test it. I think there's a lot of ways to abuse it. I'm really excited. And this is the last one that we're reviewing for this video. So let me know what you think. As always, I want to hear what you guys are excited about. Again, if I missed some cool combo or interaction, let me know. If you think I'm way off base, let me know. But yeah, as always, thanks for watching, and until next time, may you walk on warm sands.